So this is the Tech Savvy Authorpreneur panel. We have our guest speakers today, Justine Manziano, KG Horowick, and Aria Augustin, and they are going to be discussing the tech savvy meaning in the ever-changing industry and to give our pointers on how to up your teaching game, regardless of your publishing goals. But I'm gonna go over a few more details about each of them. Turn that off. Justine Mazzano is a young author and freelance editor living in Bronx, New York, with her husband, son, and a cacophony of cats. She can normally be found at her website, www.justinemoranzano.com, and she's on all the social media haunts. If you're looking in these places and can't find her, she's probably off reading fan fiction. She'll be back soon. Her debut novel, The Order of the Key, will be available from Black Rose Writing in July of 2020. Yeah, yay! KJ Horowick is a freelance developer and graphic designer, the creator of Winterviews and co-creator of Writer Emotion and Rewrite It Club, with a passion for secondary fantasy worlds like those found in the books of Andre Norton, Ivan Katt, Rand and Robin Miller. She now writes her own bizarre fantasy and science fiction stories, usually laced with sex and dragons. Currently, she resides in the rainy Pacific Northwest, where she works on a broad range of client projects, plots how to destroy her characters' lives, and occasionally falls down rabbit holes. And our last presenter is Aria Augustin, is a freelance editor, YouTuber, published poet, and creator of Bookish Valhalla. With a deep appreciation for lyrical prose, lush and complex worlds, and lifelike characters, she loves writing fully immersive stories of the science fiction and fantasy genres. When she isn't diving between the pages of a good book or eyes deep in ink, you can find her wandering through a museum, experimenting with recipes, tweeting with friends, or leveling up on a video game. A senior at the University of Washington, she studies English literature and Japanese. She lives in the Hellmouth of Seattle with her husband and their little furry feline, Hellion, Mary Con. Right, and I am Diana Whitney. I'm moderating this panel. So we'll get started with our questions. First of all, with an author's work often perceived as just writing stories, does the statement hold true for today's publishing world?
No. We are not in that world anymore. And it's kind of, I mean, in some ways it's unfortunate because I feel like we get to, back in the day, it was much easier. You'd write your book and you'd send it out and then the publishing company would accept it and then kind of take care of a large chunk of the rest. We're not on that planet anymore. With the growth of tech and just, I mean, going paperless and all of that, we're now authors, we're marketers, we have side gigs, we are like just doing as much as we can and diving into the tech world to help promote our books and to help create our books. And there are a lot of super helpful tech solutions that we use regularly.
I'll just slip
Okay.
in.
Yeah.
I just want to say, like, historically speaking, the way that the publishing industry altogether has evolved is really interesting because with the invention of the lovely internet, that really opened up ways that, you know, writers can connect with readers, but also the way that publishing works. So I think it's like less than 50 years ago, you really didn't have things like self-publishing. You didn't have a lot of indie publishers either. There really wasn't much of a variety, and you pretty much had like your crappy box computer, a notebook, or a typewriter. I mean, there weren't a lot of options for how you would go about the writing. So with
She
these,
says less than 50 years, but it's much less than 50
I
years.
know, but I don't know the exact year. And so like, like I know that like my one professor still uses a typewriter, and he's not that old. So I mean, it's definitely like.
That's why I'm saying, I'm like, when I first started, you just sent in your manuscript. Like that was where I began, and I'm like 37. Like,
I mean, when I was a
it
kid,
hasn't been that long.
Yeah, so it evolved so quickly. And so that means that the role of the writer, it's not just writing anymore, depending on the pathway that you choose. I mean, your involvement in having to do a little bit more in terms of how to navigate the internet, publishing is a lot more expanded now. I mean, even advertising back then for books is completely different than it is today, just due to the invention of the internet. So I'll stop there. KJ.
There's still sometimes a cultural stigma that writers just sit down, write a story, and then their job is done. And the reality is that authors are actually business owners. You know, they don't just sit down and write. They create this product, and then when this product is done, they have to have, you know, they have to test it. They have to send it to readers, and they have to really look at, do all the working pieces fit together? Is this something they're going to throw out in the world and piss somebody off, or is it going to be a useful product? And then when that's done, you know, then you've got to make it look nice. You've got to package it well. You've got to market this thing. And so an author basically is an entire running business. They have to wear so many hats, and these days they have to operate in two worlds. They have to operate in the physical world with physical books and cons and brick and mortar houses. And then they've got to operate in the digital world, talking to readers online, working with authors or agents and publishers, or even working with places like Amazon and Ingram Spark. You know, you got to kind of be everything.
So then from that standpoint, what is most important about being tech savvy as an author?
All right, real quick, I just want to say, I think it's just being willing to learn and embrace kind of that you are going to have to, to some extent, learn some new technology. Even if, you know, you still got your busted up Lenovo from like 1960, well, maybe not 65. I don't know if they've been around that long, but it's not going to work anymore. You know, your floppy.
Listen, your ages are all off. Your ages are all off.
Very, very.
I am a millennial. I don't know when these things have been invented, but my point is like, it's as
they've been around and like. Go down to 20s.
I was a kid when
IBM was in the 80s.
Yes.
Okay. Well, okay.
I'm not that old yet.
I'm not saying anybody is. I don't know exactly when the Lenovo was, you know, like really boxy, but you know how they go through those design moments. You know, the cars used to be square, now they're round, now they're going back to square. It's like that with computers, where they were small, they were like big, then they get smaller, now they're kind of getting chunkier again. So like, you know, it's like the way that you have to even just approach technology has changed. Every year, new software comes out. There are updates. I mean, I wish Google would stop updating so much so I didn't have to relearn every time, but because there's always a feature that moves. So being aware that technology is kind of an ever-moving thing, and publishing has kind of jumped into it a bit, actually a lot, and you're gonna kind of, if that's the way you're going, you're gonna have to be open to learning how to navigate this new world. That openness and willingness to learn is going to be so important, because the more you dig your heels in, the more it's going to hurt.
I mean, in that vein, just leaping off of that, I've like I was saying, I joke how I was just a kid when this stuff came out, but the truth is like I was always kind of tech oriented as a kid, and I can't tell you how much easier it makes my life that I kind of grew with this stuff and always had it around, because when it's like 75% of my work writing wise is done online with online people reaching out to people. 25% is not online, but usually I find the people I'm in contact with not online through online resources. So it does help so much. And like, as I'm going through this journey, because we talked earlier, like I have this book coming out, there's been almost everything I've done has been online work. So even this conference we're participating in now is entirely online. So it pays so much to prepare yourself for, like Ari was saying, prepare yourself for the fact that you're going to have to learn these, you may have to learn new things if you're not already adept at technology, and that it becomes a huge part. And it's also really helpful, especially because, we have that writing stereotype that, everyone is an introvert and would rather be behind the manuscript. And while not every author is like that.
I don't understand that, because all the authors I know, y'all are crazy. Like, just a couple drinks in, y'all are crazy.
Well,
loud.
Yes. But I'm an extroverted introvert. So this, I'll be tired for like
wait.
a couple of hours after
this. Are you
this.
an ambivert? Because I'm kind of like a skewed ambivert, which is like, I can be leave me the heck alone, but most of the time I'm like, love me.
Well, I like this interaction. Like, I love doing this, but then like when I'm done, I'll be like, okay, I could use a nap now. Like, and knowing that it helps so much because a lot of the tech stuff is not, person to person. There's a space in between. There's time for an email to come back. It actually is less taxing on me to have email conversations, like, tweet people and that sort of thing, than it is for me to have like an in-person or like a phone call. So from the introverted side of me that does exist, even though it doesn't look like it usually, it is so helpful to have that, where I can fall back on that and reach out to people, but reach out to them in a medium that does not like give me that mental exhaustion. So
Bouncing off that, kind of bringing us back to why it's important to be tech savvy. I think honestly these days you really need to be tech savvy just as a human, depending on where you are in the world. But there's so much. I mean, when I was a kid, honestly, we didn't have technology. I mean, we had computers, but in home probably wasn't until I was in high school. And, I learned on a typewriter. I played an Atari 64, I think it was, where the battery was like this giant.
Yes. Oh, it was an Atari 2600. It was a Commodore 64.
Thank you. Okay.
Because me too.
But it's nowadays it's, in high school, I would have never, ever thought about having a phone attached to my hip at all times. And I look back on my college days and I'm like, oh, I'm glad we didn't have cell phones, But honestly, these days, it's not only about the technology and it's about learning it. It's about, there is a line of etiquette that happens online that is different from offline when you're interacting with people. And sometimes it's the same. But I think knowing not only how these pieces of electronics work and how they interact with other people, but you have to understand the etiquette that comes with it. You can't just send an agent your full manuscript and talk for 3 pages about how much you love yourself in your book. That's not the way it works. You have to follow a certain protocol and understand that protocol to even have a chance to go, okay, let's start the first spark of this conversation. Mm-hmm. So.
Side note, I think real quick that as KJ was saying, I do agree with that it's something that even everyday people have to deal with. Because I remember it wasn't actually that long ago. It was like in the early 2000s when my flip phone would run out of minutes. I'd have to go down to the payphone to be like, yo, I'm going to be down at the library if you want to pick me up. Mm-hmm. Now there are like no payphones. And we definitely have more than flip phones, and even the way we apply for jobs or even speak to people on a daily basis has completely changed. So I definitely agree with that it's kind of a bit everywhere. And I'm fortunate because I did grow up kind of as the computer was into a lot more houses. and like you couldn't be on the computer and the phone at the same time. But you know, it was like the line between the worlds when they started to, you know. So I was very fortunate that we even had one, because my family didn't have that much money, but it was getting to that point where a lot more households could afford it, which was really nice. And so I got to learn how to type, how to, you know, play around on the computer and things like that. And I think even something as basic as just knowing how to go through your computer, type something up and save it is, I mean, really good. I mean, that's really all you need for a lot of things today. So, yeah.
But in an extension of what both Ari and KJ were saying, to bring that kind of together is the fact that, like, for instance, like KJ was saying about needing to know etiquette, and Ari was saying about how there are no payphones anymore. That's happening in publishing. We are getting to a point where people don't take physical submissions.
You do not mail them in.
You don't
anymore.
mail your manuscript anymore. You email your manuscript. You email your partials or your queries.
I think some places in the UK still do it. I don't know why, but most places don't do it anymore. They actually actively say don't, because you'll never see it.
That is our, now this is us not having payphones anymore. If you were still hanging on to that old age where you did not do that sort of thing, the email, now you have to, if you want to be a writer, you have to be able to email your stuff out. And so it becomes a vital part of what we do every day as we're sending out requests, or as we're reaching out to publishers or small indie publishers, or even if we're just like hiring cover designers as an indie author, or like, that's a vital part of what we do now. And it just getting into contact with people on a regular basis is almost entirely digital now. So it's so valuable to be on top of your tech.
Yeah.
Definitely. So on a minimal level, what programs should authors be familiar with and why?
To start with, Microsoft Word. I mean, it is absolutely essential, and not just as a plug for Microsoft, but the fact that this is what agents use, this is what editors use, this is what publishing houses use. You know, when they're working with authors, they pass these files back and forth. They add track changes, they add comments, and then they expect the author to close them and send them back with all of that stuff still compiled in the document. When you're querying an agent, you know, you really have to know Microsoft Word to be able to format correctly to send that stuff out. Again, this falls under etiquette. What is the etiquette for reaching out to an agent and saying, hey, I have a book, are you interested in reading it, and trying to sell it? You know, and the other thing is email, which we've talked about a lot. Email is absolutely essential, because this is the way in. You know, there's places in Canada and a few in the UK, and I think there's one or two of the big 5 houses that still do the random send in slush pile, but even they're moving over to email, and they're moving over to Query Manager, and everything is online. So those 2 things, email and Microsoft Word, every author needs to know at the very, very basic level of their technological knowledge.
I'm going to argue with you about Microsoft Word. So
this is an Apple thing. We have issues. I was kidding.
Wait, do you believe I'm anti-Apple? No.
Oh my God, is this going to be like an Apple versus Microsoft fight?
No, I'm definitely not going to say Microsoft Word, but if you don't have Microsoft Word and you can't afford Microsoft Word, there are, and because of the fact that more and more, because at first the other versions of word processing docs weren't the same or didn't save in the same format, so I couldn't have this argument a couple of years ago. However, Google Docs and Open Office, they do actually have where you can save in .doc like any Microsoft Word document. And I mostly use Google Docs because I just kind of hate having to pay for Mostly Word, but that's just me.
I'm not gonna team up on you, KJ, but I am a Google girl as well. Mostly because I've had Microsoft Word on my tablets and things, and it never syncs, and I keep losing things, and it's actually a little bit more difficult visually for me to navigate. So that's why I use Google because it's just there and it's easier.
For me particularly, like you were saying about not syncing, that's
Yeah.
an issue for me because I write in usually on 4 different devices in a given day. If I'm at work, I write on Google Docs from my desk at work when I have downtime. If I hope no one I know is listening to this.
Of course they are.
I mean, please, in the book, in the acknowledgments, I gave a shout out to my my coworkers for pretending that I don't write at work. But anyway, but like I'm doing that, and then sometimes I'm writing on my cell phone, and sometimes I'm writing on my tablet, and sometimes I'm writing at my desk at home. And so with all that, the syncing, being on top of, being on top of that, and having a program that's really good at that is really necessary for me. And because I had some problems with Word in that regard, Docs became my thing. So wait.
Not just Microsoft Word, but you can use Google Docs, you can use Scrivener, you can use other things that all download to either a document or an RTF file, which is what agents, editors, publishers, all those guys use on their end. So thank you.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to preference and usability in terms of like who's using it and what's easiest for them. I know people who use Microsoft Word, they love it, they use it all the time. I'm sitting there like, why? Because it drives me nuts, and it never works for me. There are some issues with Google occasionally with saving on my end that I have, but it was never at the same scale as like the Microsoft, and it could be the device I was using as well. I mean, there's so many reasons why it probably didn't work for me. But I think like finding something that works for you is probably the most important, because I might use Google Docs because I like that it will save it into a cloud and I usually don't have to worry, or I could do it offline and I usually don't have to worry that I'm going to lose what's there. But for other people, Microsoft Word or Scrivener or Better Air, they just work better for those people in terms of saving them. So I think that's like the key here is just finding a technology that you can navigate and use to the fullest and the best resource for you. For me, I think knowing how to do internet searches is important. That seems so basic, and I know it's not 100% a program. But
no, but it's still tech. I mean,
it's like
you have to be able to.
It's one of those very basic things, like just knowing how to narrow your search on the internet for something is really important.
Also knowing what sites aren't really reliable sources, or being able to tell what sites aren't reliable sources. Because I mean, I'm poking fun, and this is mean, but I love my mom, but my mom will like search for things and she'll tell me all the latest news that is not real.
My mom does that too, and I sent her like this updated list of like all the fake news places, like the actual fake news places. And
I mean, if you haven't been doing this all your life, it's easy to get sucked into that sort of trap. And so you definitely want to make sure that the things like you check your sources when you're searching. And that's it's so important to know, like if you're researching for a book, that you're not looking in a place that just does not have the proper facts. So
my mom also seems to think that The Onion is real news, and I have to frequently tell her it's not. So,
well, I mean, some days it sounds like real news.
It really does. So one alternative to Word and Google Docs would be LibreOffice. It's something I have. I don't always use it, but it pretty much does what they both do, but it's free. And
OpenOffice is like that too.
Yeah, so you can, and it comes with like Excel sheets and everything else that you might need. I'm not sure if OpenOffice does, but I'm pretty sure a lot of these are all like own. The same. And so the aesthetics look a little different, but I really like it in terms of like if I don't have Word or can't get Google Docs to listen to me, it's like right there. You can get I believe you can get a mobile version as well, and so that's kind of important. But those are the basics that I use. I think the only other basic, and I call it a basic because I feel like it's something so necessary that if you forget it, I may smack you mentally, is to have something to save externally. that is a basic for me. I have like a million of them over here. Having something to save externally just as an extra backup is really important. The clouds are great, technology is improving, but they still have problems. So just like being aware basically of the kind of problems that can occur with the technology and how to just avoid it. Better to be safe than sorry is what I always say.
3 different places.
I save it in more than that. I've got a passport one. I've got a silver one, and then I have this little black one over here. That's how paranoid I am. But to be honest, like if you just save it to your computer, say you use LibreOffice or Microsoft Word, you just save it to your computer. Oh, I'll just save it later. Your computer crashes. I've seen it all the time on Twitter. Tears, open tears, like, and it hurts because it happened to me one time and I couldn't recover anything I wrote. That's like hundreds of pages gone. So it does hurt. Story ideas that I can't even recall now. But it's like having a backup. It's one of those basic emergency things that you just want to have, you know. As women, you know, there's certain things we keep on us everywhere we go. You guys,
a flash drive should be one of those things.
One of those things, yes. So please, 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 I'm begging you. And if you don't have one, I'm seriously like so tempted to buy like those really cheap $100 ones and just send them out into the world, because just save it somewhere. All right.
One thing that we've been talking about but haven't like really like talked about is the fact that submissions have to go through online. Sometimes it's as simple as an email, but there are online services that do it, like Query Manager, Submittable. Those are two online programs that,
Duotrope as well.
Duotrope's another one, yeah, for short stories, right? Is that more for other stuff?
It's got
too,
like a mix.
Stories?
I believe there's like some poetry on there as well, because it was recommended to me from my poetry teacher.
So yeah, there's, instead of emailing, you'll like fill out a form on those those programs, or they'll have like a submission form. You fill that out and send it in, and you can track that. Then you can go back and check and see, you know, if it's been read, if any comments have been made on it yet, and things like that. It's a very good thing to know how to navigate, because not all submissions are email. And actually, I feel like a lot of the agents seem to be moving away from email submissions because it's easier to track on Query Manager. So Ari's background's going nuts and it's killing me.
I'm a little sick, and so I was trying to very discreetly look for a tissue, but that's not.
But what happens when you do that is like the aliens take over. And
I almost wore my green. So I have a little thing to tell writers real quick, and this is kind of off topic, but I just need to tell you. I wore a green shirt one time. And it does happen here. I almost wore the green shirt today. It would have literally cut off everything but my head because of the way it works. Don't do that. Color coordinate for these things.
Don't be a headless horseman.
No.
Yeah, a lot of those simple tech things that you were talking about are, okay, I teach high school senior English, and that's a lot of stuff that I've tried to, over the year, express to them. You know, you need to know how to deal with email and the etiquette of email, and you do need to know how to format a document appropriate to what you're being asked to do, and very simple little things that when you get out into the real world are going to, somebody's going to look at that and say they don't know what they're doing and move on to the next person. So those are I think those were very good points to make when it comes to the bare minimum of things. For actually being tech savvy, what, in your opinion, would be who that's more geared toward? Is that geared toward a querying author or indie authors?
KJ, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I can start with this one. Honestly, both should be, they should both strive to be equally savvy. But the reality is, you know, with querying authors, I think there is more of a focus on getting the writing, getting the formatting, and just the very basic knowledge to get your story in front of the right people to get it sold. But with an indie author, all of a sudden you're on your own. You know, it's again, it comes back to being a business owner. Story, it's about, you know, somebody has to design the interior of the book, somebody has to design the exterior of the book. You know, you have to have email, you have to have a website, you have to have social media, ways to reach authors, you have to be able to research the market. So all of a sudden you've got a dozen more hats on your head, and you really, really need to understand not only how all the technology in those spaces works, but what's the etiquette for all those spaces, especially when it comes to something like book reviews. How do you reach out to book bloggers instead of, you know, just throwing your book at them and saying, read the damn book, please, and just love
Ari
me.
will tell you. Ari will tell
Can
you.
I just like slip in here real quick?
Yes.
I think the two things as a book blogger that I see that just and I love everybody who submits like review requests to our blog, because it means that we're out there and people think that, you know, it's a good place to have their stuff featured. But there are two things I see that drive me bonkers, but also I feel really bad for like the author because they probably didn't know. And that's a horrible, horrible cover that was done by themselves. And I really sometimes just want to like help them with that. And the other one is that they don't understand etiquette. Like if I tell you, don't send me your whole book yet, just let me know these details, let me know what market it's in, like give me the blurb. And they send me like attached files that could have viruses and like just weird things, or they don't follow, like they don't even read the page. Like I could go on for ages, you know, like I don't read erotica, but I get a lot of erotica submissions, like probably because I read paranormal romance now on there, which was probably like a bad idea. I mean, I've read a lot of it this year. I figured it wasn't going to be that big of a deal. But now I've been getting like erotica westerns, and it's like, but we don't read erotica or westerns, and it's right there. I think having an awareness of how relationships with the different parts of, you know, like with reviewers works, and if you're not sure, ask. Like I would love if someone would just ask me like, what should I include? I didn't see it somewhere. And then I'd politely tell them, like, as opposed to like, here's my book, hope you review it. And there's like even no signature. I get that a lot too. Like they forget to sign off. I'm like, I don't know who you are. Like I don't. I think that having an awareness of how to make things easier, not just for yourself, but for the people that you're asking for help is really important. Like if you don't give me the things that I ask for, it's going to create a lot of back and forth. I have to keep having conversation with you, which means I'm not reading the stuff I'm reading for someone else, but I'm also not getting to reading your book yet either. And some people just don't answer. It's like an automated system, which don't even get me started. I remember last year, this is a really good example of what not to do with book bloggers. Somebody had it set up on an automated system, and every week I got like 2 to 4 emails from them requesting that I read their book. And I kept emailing back and saying, this is not really something that we would read. I'm really sorry. You know, I try to be so polite. At some point I was like, can you just like stop sending emails? Because I would log in and there's like 10 from this one person. And that's an automated system. That's what they told me. I'm not sure if that's true, but it was just weird. And it creates a lot of like, it's difficult for me to actually like see the value kind of in your work. I want to read your story, so just make it easier for me to be like, oh, I love this, give it to me, you know? Just I'm gonna go ranting, but
Well, let me pull
etiquette.
you off of it.
Etiquette.
So you guys are all talking like you said indie authors it's a different situation, and while I'm technically traditionally published, my publisher is extremely small, and so marketing is pretty much 100% me. And what I've learned is if I don't know what I'm doing, then I would be screwed. It is very important. Thankfully, I have some working knowledge. KJ has helped me too, where I've gone, wait, what? Because she's great with design stuff. And the other day we had to have a conference call because I'm sitting there like the website. So like, and that's even from someone who considers themselves tech savvy. So there are always going to be, which is another topic, I think, but I think I'm bringing it up too early. But there is always also that time where you have to holler for help when it's something you don't know, which we will, get around to, I guess. But yeah, there's definitely that, and there's also the fact that even if you're traditionally published, a lot of publishers do not provide marketing, and so those marketing conventions that you're going to have to learn as a completely indie author is still going to be something that you have to learn for when you're traditionally published a lot of the time. So just something to keep in mind.
I'm just gonna make a side note because I know we're trying to keep it condensed, but I think that understanding marketing in general of your book is really important, whether or not the publisher covers it or not. It's really important to understand that your cover is often the first impression that anyone has of your book. That
people do judge books by their covers.
I'm not gonna lie, I have rejected reviewing books because I could not put the cover on my website. I couldn't. I'm vain. I'm sorry, but there's a lot more to the publishing of a book than just throwing a cover onto a completed story. There's so much more, and everything from formatting to the cover to the blurb to just little details that I think are sometimes overlooked are super important when presenting it to other people. There's so many nonverbal signals that a book gives us, and I totally feed into them. So it's readers like me are out there. There are millions of us. We are tricked by the psychology of color, word patterns, etc. And we will buy a book just on that. So understanding, look at Justine, she's like, oh.
No, I'm agreeing with you. I am totally agreeing with you. I got lucky and my cover's really pretty. So I
actually said that to Maria. I was so scared they were going to give her an ugly cover, and I would have been like, Justine. But I really like the font.
Yeah,
I really like
cover,
the font.
Thankfully.
So I think understanding it, regardless if you're indie, especially if you're self-published, you should, but indie and self-published or traditional, I think you benefit by understanding how to sell your book. Because people will ask you oh, where'd you get that idea, or tell me about your story, and if you're like me, you're just gonna be like eh. Stare at them.
Tell me about your story is the worst question ever, but that's a whole different can of worms. Yeah, which is something that you should know, marketing. But yeah, I totally, yeah. Anyway.
Let's move on.
Oops, Diana. Yeah, there you go.
I clicked it. Okay. There's a lot of good basic ideas and programs for tech-savvy authors, but what about something a little more modern, focusing on the writing side of authorpreneurship? What have you all found that's useful to help strengthen your own writing?
I used Pro Writing Aid on this most recent story, and it was extremely helpful. It is an editing program. It helps you find a bunch of things. It does all these reports, and it's actually a little scary at first when you look at it because it's very expansive, and you can do reports on everything about your story. And it's obviously not content editing, but line editing. And are you using words too often? Are you misplacing commas, things like that. It is great, but you have to be careful, and you do have to know your voice as a writer before you go into a program like that, because some of the suggestions will just suck the voice right out of your story. So you have to know what your voice is, what the way you want to like break the rules in some cases, because rules are made to be broken. But you can, if not, you'll get tripped up and you'll start sounding very robotic in your story. I think I found a lot where I was like, what edit is this? What are they telling me to do?
It wants to make your
as long
English
as you,
too
I'm sorry.
perfect. It wants to make your English too perfect.
That's
it.
And
It's not real, organic. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And if you're not careful about it, you will let them make your, perfect your English and perfect your English. Yep. Justine just said that. And then it'll it'll make it very robotic and very uniform sounding. And, when you're dealing with characters and dialogue, particularly, you do not want that. So.
But I do like that it's not imposing. Like sometimes you can get an editing tool that just keeps flagging the same thing and won't leave you alone. And you're like, no, I don't want to take your suggestions, bunt off. And it just will keep flagging it. I like that ProWriting Aid, like once you tell it to just like ignore those, like if it sees it's there multiple times, you can't actually tell it to just ignore that. And it does have like a figurative like speech or figurative writing or something more creative option on it, which I tend to go kind of wonky with. But like Justine says, a lot of these programs try to make it too perfect, and an understanding that they're just suggestions is really important too. Like you don't have to change all the 500 and whatever little, it shows up like at the top, because I use ProWriting Aid and it's like, oh, you've got like 500 things to fix now, and you have to like go through and it'll flag everything from like passive voice to, oh, this sentence could be reworded to be better. And it's like, no, this sentence is worded for good flow. I don't know what you're talking about. The way you're writing it, is a little weird.
But it's also helpful because you don't see those things in your own writing a lot of times, and it'll make you reread that sentence.
I really like
if there is something wonky about it, you'll see that then. And so it's helpful to like sort of call your attention. Is this okay? And then you look at it and you go, okay, yeah, this is okay. Or you go, whoa, Justine, what the hell? And fix it.
I really like when it questions my word usage. Like, is this the best word you could use?
And then you're like,
and it actually gives
writing professor.
But you know what I like about it is when I edit other people's work, I actually do that. I'll be like, I'm not sure this is the right word, and then I give them like at least 2 to 3 like other words that might work better. And I like that ProWriting Aid does that. It's like it's me coming back being like, yo, here's some better words. And one of the big things that I absolutely hate when I read is repetition, which is so easy to accidentally do. ProWriting Aid catches that like it's so annoying when it's like, hey, you've already used this word. And it's like, as you go through it, it'll like flag repetition. It'll tell me how many times I use that word, and that annoys me. And I go back through and have to check. So ProWriting Aid is definitely one that I've used, and I think it's funny sometimes to see my really bad habits. Yeah. And then I'd say Hemingway Editor is another one I use. You could use like the free browser option. It's mostly for short stuff or like poetry, for people who write poetry. It can be annoying though, because Hemingway was all like, kill all adverbs, don't put any color in your writing, as someone who shows too much, like that's how I hear it. And so it can be annoying that way, but I use it sometimes because it's really good for like flagging when maybe a sentence in a poem or like some stanzas aren't really flowing really well because you're using just too many extra words or words that mean the same thing. Because sometimes when you read passages, they're really just saying the same thing in like 6 different ways, and it's pretty, but like purple. It helps you to like make it less purple. And so I like it because you don't have to take all the suggestions, and it highlights in different colors the different things. So
one thing that is really cool about Hemingway that isn't in ProWriting ProWriting Aid, is Hemingway will grade your work. It'll age group your work.
Yeah.
Which
I love
is
it.
Really, as somebody who writes young adult and wants to make sure that my story is readable for you know, you don't go young adult when you're writing young adult. You go like 6th grade reading level.
I think it really wants you to be like
Something like
somewhere between 4th and 5th
Four
is
and
optimal,
yeah.
because most people who read somewhere between a 4th and 5th level.
So what ends up happening
scary to me.
Yeah. But what ends up happening, it will tell you. It'll be like, that's too complicated a sentence.
Like,
that's
why would you do that?
Like adult level sentence.
It
Keep
changes
it
as you type
grade.
too. It changes as you type too. Like as you edit, it'll change like the score on this. So it's really cool to see, like, apparently I go like 10th grade all the way and then have to pare it back.
That doesn't surprise me, Ari.
This is what we're going to do. I don't have to worry. I just worry for big people. Well, one of my favorite things that I've found is Scrivener, and I'm probably going to die on that hill, but I used to write with Microsoft Word, and then when I went to Scrivener, it made sense because all of a sudden I've got 2 windows side by side and I can write in both, or I can use one that has, you know, like some made up fantasy dictionary I've made, and then one that has the story, and I can use it as a reference when I write. I've got a list of all my files. I know where the chapters are, and then I've got a whole reference section, and I can storyboard in there and actually look at the structure of the story. I can look at a visual timeline and see, like, are we going to too many places in this story, or do I need to pare it back to like 2 or 3 locations? It's got places to write word targets and meet those targets when you're doing sprints. And Scrivener is just, when you're actually writing and trying to really get to the guts of the story, it's amazing because you really can. Once you can get past the learning curve, it's got everything in there that you need to not, and you can kind of ignore the rest of the world. And then, you know, digging into the deep stuff, Jen Davenport and I started a group called Rewrite It Club, and we meet on Twitter once a month, and we do the same thing. We read Lisa Cron's book, we ask why on everything, and we get down to all the basic levels of just storytelling. When you get away from editing, get away from grammar, and is your story working? Is it structurally there? Are your characters happening? And it's online, so it's a really nice way to look at story, look at interacting and starting that networking process with other writers that are going to end up being your support group when you're marketing. So anyways, those are some of my favorites.
Sorry. No, it's just that, you know, writers do have a whole spectrum of methods, from plotters to pantseers, builders. There's many different ways to approach their story, and what are some ways technology can help an author to Frankenstein together a story from the first spark of an idea to a fully published novel? Personally, I started one years ago and started it at point A and was going in a straight line, and I got stuck somewhere along the way. So I recently started a new story, and I'm kind of personally all over the place with it, a scene here, a scene there, and I'm not sure what direction it's headed in yet. So what are ways where you could take something like that? I'm going to start with you, KJ. You look excited.
Okay, so I also started the Writer in Motion community with Jenny Chappelle, and this is actually something that we look at, but we look at it in the form of a short stories framework. So when you're working with 1,000 words versus 100,000, you can kind of look at, okay, how do I get this story from that very first spark to this thing is ready to go to the printer? And it's really an intricate process, and it's very personal to every single writer. So one of the things that I've looked at Cassandra's 9-point grid system, which is fantastic. It's just 9 different points, and you kind of go through and you see how these 9 different big elements tie together. Jamie Gold and Gwen Hayes both have beat sheets that are absolutely fantastic. There's Blake Snyder's Save the Cat, not Beat the Cat. Gwen Hayes has romance.
It's actually the opposite of saving the cat, beating the cat.
Just beat the cat. It's done. Beat sheets are fantastic because you really start, instead of looking at the story in a linear fashion, you look at the story as a whole building. You know, what's the foundation? What happens on the first floor or the first act? What happens in the next act that sort of builds on this and continues to strengthen that structure and that character story arc? You know, and you can look at scene points and how to move scenes around and get them in the right area. How do they flow from one to the next? So there's a lot of really good elements that help you visualize the story the way that a movie would be. And then once you can sort of visualize that top level of, okay, we're starting here, we're going to go through these 3 points, and then we're going to end up here, then it's easier to get down to that scene level and start writing the nitty gritty to help it flow, you know, organically from one movement to the next. So, next person.
Justine, did you have anything you wanted to say, or?
You're on mute. Oh, okay.
Okay. So I'll go ahead. So, I'm very visual. Like your whole, KJ's whole movie thing is actually probably really close to how I see things in my mind. I'm like a cross between a pantser and a plotter, but sometimes I go like hardcore plotter, just because I used to pants and it's just a hot mess, and it never takes shape. It's like making Play-Doh, but the recipe's all wrong, and so it's for me it is like kind of what KJ was saying, understanding, like going back and either reading other books. I use my Kindle a lot these days because I'm always on the go, reading a lot of books to just kind of remind myself how a story, you know, can be shaped. I have a whole stack of books here I could show, but I have to turn off my background. But for me, it's visual stuff. I make a visual storyboard, usually in either like Google Docs. I used to have Scrivener, and the storyboard aspect there is actually really cool. That was like the one thing I really liked about it, is like all the blocks, and you can do it by scene or like by act as well. So it was one of my favorite aspects of that app. But I also make musical playlists on Spotify and YouTube. That's like my favorite thing, actually, to also see how each playlist, I might have one for like a story, or I might make them for characters, or I also have ones for specific scenes, which I don't know why, but sometimes a certain song really gets me in the moment when I need to write a scene. And it's kind of like a movie. When you're watching that scene in a film, the music really does actually contribute to that whole vibe. So for me, that's a part of my process. Having visuals, I make a whole, one of the things I use is One Stop for Writers. They have like an online tool where you can build your characters like completely. It's actually like a beast of a tool that I'm still learning to navigate, but you could literally like learn everything you could possibly learn about your character, and build a whole character profile with images, height, you know, things that they like, their wound, lies they tell themselves, secrets they have, what do they wear, where do they go, who do they hang with. Pretty much it's like, you know, character development on steroids, and I love it. And I'm always in that tool because everything I need is there to really get into my characters. Because for me, my process really starts with understanding like my characters from the inside out, or the world that they're in from the inside out. So sometimes it's just me throwing all the details at a storyboard wall, and then like a crime scene investigator separating everything afterwards. But I mean, that's kind of my process. Is just I have a skeleton outline pretty much, and that's how I kind of navigate. But I think where I get kind of nuts is I research a lot before I even get to that point, which is where I kind of deviate with than some other writers. I take probably a year to research before I write. So sorry, KJ, go.
I haven't used that. Do you find that character building actually works for like fantasy and science fiction writers when they're building secondary worlds? Because I see a lot of character sheets that just, You know, they're asking things like, what's your favorite cereal? If you...
Oh no, it's way more than
I'm
that,
like,
KJ. Oh my God. Like,
this girl doesn't have that shit. What the hell?
it is way more than that. So they have, I'll show you like two things. So you have access to like all these thesauruses online.
Yes, Angela, love Angela.
All of them. So you can build your character from like their wound, like whatever happened to them to set them on the course they're now. All the emotions. They even have ones for symbolism, color, so that you can really build a very dynamic character.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what your character's motivation is and you're just hitting a block, guess what? There's a generator on the thing where you can just click it and try to get like some sparks going. I really like that it gives me control to just play God, like Dr. Frankenstein with my characters. Like, pick the pieces that seem to bring it to life and go with it. And it's way more than just like what's their favorite cereal. It's what's something your character never leaves their house with. What's something that they have that other characters might not know they have, that they find like really good meaning in. What's something they do when no one else is looking. You know, things that we have as living human beings.
Yeah.
You know, and it really makes you think about people and how they interact with other people, but also how they interact with themselves, that who you are is more than just what other people see. You're a different person on the inside too. And I really like that you get to explore that inside part as much as the outside. And there's just like templates after templates after templates. It's beautiful. I don't even have to think about it.
That's why I like Lisa Khan's stuff, you know, Story Genius and Wired for Story, because it's the same thing that, you know, you kind of shed the outside and you get so deep inside the character and start asking why on everything. Well, why do they step to the left every third step? You know, what are they hiding from the world? Why are they hiding it? Why does it have meaning? And I think it becomes so essential to know all of those deep core issues when you're really moving through the story, because without those core issues, what do all the reactions mean, you know?
I feel like the more you understand your characters, the more you understand why they're important to the story and how the world affects them and how they're influencing the world as well. Once you understand the kind of people that they are. And I think from when I talk to other writers, is kind of where they struggle, is that character development. And I think it just comes from digging deeper and deeper into, you know, even the things that make you uncomfortable about characters. I have to be honest, like they have this thesaurus online, which is like the emotional wound one. And I mean, I was like super triggered when I was reading like the foster care one, because I was like, that is so true. I have insecurity issues. Like, that was me for like 10 years. I was like phoning up Maria about this. But there's some in there that cover even things like, you know, just very difficult topics like rape, abuse, you know, things like that. So be careful when you go on there. But it goes into not just like what's happened to a person, but how that affects how they see the entire world. And that's so important. How people see the world really influences their actions. And understanding that it might not make sense to you, but it makes sense to them. And understanding how is really important, especially like if you're making compelling villains or antagonists in general. Like, that's super important, to not have like someone who's like, I'm evil. Have a reason.
You know, these characters don't just have a trauma and then get over it and move on with their lives. They carry it every step of the way. You know, and I think that sometimes people forget that too. Coming sort of back to technology and etiquette, is that when an agent says, I don't want an abusive relationship in my romance books, you know, there is a reason. One is the market. You know, we're not labeling abusive relationships as romances anymore, but also because you could end up actually triggering that agent, and then they say, I don't want to work with you on any story now because you didn't follow a very basic rule. And so when you're looking at online and technology and really reading up and getting that etiquette, you have to go, okay, what's on the huge no list? You know, as much as I want to work with this person, maybe we're not a fit just for this project. So Justine, did you want to add anything, or should we move on?
I think you covered everything. Sorry.
Sorry.
I apologize for like totally muting myself and giving you guys the hand signals, but my son decided he was going to sing in the shower and you could hear it all the way over here. So,
Darn, I missed it.
you did. I was like very quick with it. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm ready to move on. I think you guys covered it really well. So.
Okay. Diana?
Yeah, I think we hit on a lot of craft sites. Were there any research sites that are kind of ones that are your go-to sites that you find most useful? Yes.
If you're writing science fiction or fantasy, check out Dan Cobalt's site. He has a book called Science in Fiction. And there's also, he has a whole blog series called Science and Sci-Fi and Fact and Fantasy. And what he does is Dan reaches out to professionals. I've written one article and it was basically on technology and how it's not portrayed accurately in the media and in books. A friend of mine, Stephanie Sauvignette, actually wrote about nursing. She's an oncologist nurse, and she wrote about how nursing and nurses are often very misportrayed in fiction. And so if you've got horses in your story, but you've never been around horses, or if you want to have a bowman in there, but you've never used a recursive bow, he's got everything, all kinds of just little tidbits and pro tips and facts that sort of bridge that, span the gap between a modern world, science fiction, fantasy, and how things really actually work. So it's a wonderful resource.
So I'm going to be more broad on mine. I have a tendency to Pinterest like a madwoman.
Yes.
I love it for a lot of different reasons. I love getting writing prompts when I'm stuck. I love collecting writing tips and tricks and stuff like that. And I also love like peeking into people's lives. So I am writing a story, YA dystopian. And so I started looking at survivalists and not pinning, like, not like looking for articles about survivalists, but looking at what survivalists are pinning, finding out what they're researching and what they consider to be like the important things they need to know going out camping for days or going out hunting or things like that, where I learned a ton about like purifying water, just like cooking what you hunt on the spot, like things like that I never, I know it wasn't a fun thing to read, things I never would have.
Move on.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, well now I know that fact, yay. But it's super helpful, just like sort of digging into like what kind of articles they're looking at too, and also just like, you know, searching different, like there are whole pages that are like life hacks for, you know, if you're a camper, or life hacks for if you know, and you find like these weird, like, oh, how to recover from a wound. You'll have nurses talking about wound care. So Pinterest is really interesting in that way, and so I like to use it for, like I said, I have a whole board that is literally links to articles, to writing research, and it is all just things that I found that I thought were really cool and don't know what to use it for yet, but they're there. I just like stumbled upon them and I was like, wow, that fact about Japanese sword making is really cool, and I'm just gonna keep that. I don't know if I'll ever use it, but pin it right here. So when I get stuck, sometimes I'll like look through those boards and be like, give me something, like give me that magic. So it's not like something that people would typically think of as writing tech, but it depends on how you use it. And so I have a lot of fun using it that way.
Yeah.
And how you search determines what you get there too.
That's true.
So, because I use
same thing as a
Pinterest
search engine
quite a bit, and it is sometimes really difficult to find very specific details unless I'm like, I have to word it weird at the top that makes me just look like a serial killer. Honestly, you try to be as like vague as possible, but like kind of beating around the bush, but saying what you need. And Pinterest is like, I don't know what you're talking about, so here's everything. It's like, sometimes you just have to be like, stab wound. Boom.
But that's the thing, writing research inevitably like lands you on that NSA list. Like, it doesn't matter what you're writing about. There's always some weird particular thing that you need to look up. Like the one time I had to look up how long a person could survive if they were buried in a shipping crate. And I'm writing it, and I'm like, God, God forbid someone gets buried alive out here somewhere, and I'm totally number one target, number one suspect, but like, that's part of writing, is you have to learn those specific details, things that most people wouldn't ask because they have no reason to ever ask it, and you are really trying to reproduce that stab wound in a believable way. Wait, KJ, what? I'm sorry, KJ was saying something and
yeah, I was going to say, like Ari was saying too, is you have to research those very uncomfortable places, not just inside the character, but you know, when you have to torture a character, or which you have to put them in a situation where there is no hope and you have to get them out, then yeah, you have to research, how can I make this the worst thing possible, but still have them come out and not completely turn into, you know, murder everybody else in the story.
Yeah,
and also not turn into something cheesy where they survive everything, no matter what.
Yeah, I think being able to go there and understanding, like, maybe not understanding, but being okay with writing about it as well. Because some people, like, I've read some scenes where the person's meant to be tortured, but you really don't feel like the villain is really torturing them very much. And it's like, this is meant to be a graphic scene. Drive it into the rib cage, you know, just like torment them. Chinese water torture. Pit and the Pendulum taught me a lot about how to mess with someone's mind. It was like my favorite book as a kid. I was like, wow, they put holes in the floor and it's like dark. Like, that would terrify the heck out of me.
It is my favorite book as a kid. I just
Edgar Allan Poe knows how to frighten you. I mean, boarding you up in a wall, like your best friend, you know, ripping someone's freaking heart out because of an eyeball. I mean, come on. But I think what I like about Pinterest, real quick, and it is a tech thing. I'm going to call it a tech thing because it's very much, you need to know how to navigate it and what to look for. I really like it for the visuals in terms of, like, sometimes I don't know how to describe hair or like certain colors.
It's really good with that.
When I put like shades of black in there and I get like a bazillion options, and like I can pick and I like doing it for writing prompts. So it's certainly super helpful pretty much for everything that you would need visually as a writer. I mean, character boards are definitely a thing. What I really like to do is watch expert reacts videos on YouTube. When you have doctors reacting to horrific scenes in films and discussing what makes them realistic or unrealistic. It sounds crazy, but it's really fun, actually. They have one where a linguistic reacts to a bunch of films where actors attempt, and sometimes fail, to use certain accents, and they get really into talking about how, like, people speak differently, like even by state in some of the videos. One of my favorites is when a doctor, like a surgeon, actually reacts to like Al Pacino's all the different scenes in all his films of him getting like blown up and blasted, and he was like, I'd be surprised if he even survives the shotgun thing, but like he was giving his commentary as he was watching it and talking about how like different parts of the body bleed a bit differently and it's more dangerous, and like, you know, so like it's a good place that if you need something a little more interactive, you don't just want to read, which some people, they just don't have time. YouTube react videos are a good way to kind of get quick information. One thing I've been using actually a lot since I got at UW is the library catalog. So if you're in college, getting access to the online database is really good for researching. I can find so many papers on Japanese stuff. So if you need some stuff on katanas or Tantos, Justine, I'm your girl. You can use it for pretty much anything, and it's not just what's in your library though, it's whatever's in that whole shared library system. So it can be coming from other colleges, and it's everything from videos to very short essays, dissertations, just different people adding to a pool of information, which is important. You can find all sorts of factual things that you need to there, which accurate representation is super important. So I found probably a lot of my Japanese stuff on there. And then I am like old school in the way that I just ask people. I do it sensitively if I can, but like, if I need to ask something about like a medical thing, I might ask one of my nursing friends, or, if I have a question about like when I was writing about addiction, I actually asked my mom, because my mom used to be, really into certain things. And she was explaining to me what it was like from her perspective to have been addicted to a substance for like 20 years, and how it affected her relationships, and what other people told her versus like how she was seeing things. So I think just doing some research and finding some people who both of you are comfortable discussing like what it was like for them, from their perspective, and kind of researching that way is a really good way to get kind of that human aspect of it. Because sometimes it's so easy to look up on WebMD, but WebMD doesn't tell you how a person is processing that. And that is really important. That's the difference. Like, everyone may have those symptoms, but everyone reacts to those differently, processes them differently. And I think that'll make, your writing a little more rich in terms of character development. Sorry, okay, I'm done. I had so much written here. It was like 3 points, but
I feel like, I mean, I know this is sort of, I'm looking at the time and I feel like we're running short on time. Am I right?
No.
I don't think so.
I'm wrong. Okay then.
I don't know how long this was. I was just intending to go until it was done.
Well,
okay. Next question. Sorry.
yeah, it's just you guys are fine, and we'll transition to instead of talking about the writing side of writing, we kind of touched on it earlier, but more of the business side of writing, and particularly having an online presence. Kind of sounds like most of you have that. Is that something that you'd strongly encouraged up and coming writers to also create and kind of curate for themselves?
Yes. Go ahead, KJ.
Start it as early as you can. But when I say have an online presence, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden you have to just, you're writing your first book and all of a sudden you need to buy a $10,000 site and have, assistance on all your social media to keep you going. No, that's not how it works. So when I say get started right away, it's, I work with a lot of authors as clients, and I also work with large marketing companies, and that web presence is so important because once you do have readers, they want to know how to find you, especially with millennials. Millennials these days, they know everything is on their phone. So if they find out that if they're looking at a book and they go, oh, that looks interesting. My generation, we just buy it. If it looks interesting, we get it and we're gone. But these days, a lot of people they'll go to Goodreads and they look up reviews, or Barnes & Noble has reviews, or they'll go, okay, but what does this author stand for? It looks like I might like this, but what are other people saying? So they'll check out their social media, they'll check out their website. And if everything looks like at a glance, like, oh, this looks really interesting, then they'll go buy the book. So, and starting with a website, you can honestly start this for free. Something as simple as a WordPress site where all the code's done, you just press a few buttons, kind of walk through the steps, and then boom, you've got a site. Wix is the same thing. If you're more comfortable with drag and drop, Wix allows you to just basically grab shit and move it around. And really, you don't need that much. A homepage to say, hey, welcome to my site, an about page to say, this is who I am, this is what I write, and then just some information about either the projects you're working on or the books that you're selling. That's it. That's really all you need. And then as you're As your audience grows, then you can look at, okay, do I start a newsletter? Do I start a blog? I mean, what are the things that I want to add to that sort of enriches that experience and forges those stronger relationships with readers and keeps them coming back for the next books? Social media. Social media is absolute necessity, and you can decide how you want to do it. You know, I use Facebook, I use Twitter, I use Pinterest and Instagram. TikTok is supposed to be the new big one. Kind of makes me cry, but you know, a lot of the younger generation, you know, my nieces love Snapchat, which again, I don't use that one. Other people use Tumblr. So really look at where your audience is or could be and look at what you're comfortable with. But start now, start talking to writers, start talking to readers, and start slowly building that audience. So when you get to the point where that first book is released and then the next one is released, you might already have 5,000 people that you're engaged with. And that's a huge base to start with, instead of going, okay, I have 3 books out here, I guess I ought to get a Twitter account. And then you don't know what, you know, where is everybody? So anyways.
Yeah, I started with Facebook and now have a Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, and Pinterest that I keep up. Keep updated somehow. And I didn't think I'd be able to. I didn't think I'd have a lot to say, but it turned out that I do. And a lot of it, I think the mistake that a lot of people make is that they go, okay, I'm going to have to talk about my book or some topic about my book all the time, or some topic about writing. And I think it's super important, because social media is social. And to remember that, you know, you're a person and you're far more interesting when you're being a person. Regardless of what you're, you know, if you're talking about, like Ari loves to post about her little Maury, her kitty.
And
I post about my son and all of his antics all the time, like things that are, you know, are fun and make you a person and make people like you. And I mean, for instance, before I really started going on social media, Ari and KJ are close friends of mine now, and yet we didn't talk before, you know, social media and us meeting in the Twitter writing community. So that is, and Writer Emotion too is a huge one.
Yeah, Writer Emotion really forged us.
Yes, and that's the thing. Like you meet your people in these places, because I mean, I'm lucky. I'm in like the center of writing land. I'm in New York. But there are people who are writing from like their little town in, you know, some flyover state, who don't have a lot of writers around and might not feel like they have their community there. And that's what social media is beautiful at doing, is forging that community for people who don't have those writing friends in real life. And it's, you know, you can feel very alone. Writing, they say that writing is like a lonely job, but if you're reaching out and you're saying, hey guys, when you get that third rejection of the day, do you kind of just want to like hit your head on the wall, or are you like, is it weird that I cry when I get edits back? And when other people are going, no, that's not weird, we've been there. It's so incredibly helpful to have that. So even not on the marketing side of social media, but on the finding other authors, finding other people with your interests, and just learning from them. Because almost everything I learned about the best way to query, about the best way to, you know, to edit, about the, you know, all of these things, I learned tips from all of my online friends. I didn't learn this in classes, and I went to college for creative writing, and I got a couple of good tidbits, but most of my really good stuff I learned from other people on social media. So
business side, it's networking with other pros or people that are both about, you know, either know more or know less, and then you learn tips and tricks that you won't find in articles, and you just learn to connect with other people in this web. So when you do launch that book as a business owner, you know, you don't just hold it up and keep spamming everybody on your wall. You talk to people and you let them spam about it, you know. And that way it carries out.
Thanks, guys.
And just you really like You build a bigger audience with the connections that you make.
Yeah. I'm one of those people who I live in the hellmouth where I don't have any writing friends here. I did try some writing groups, but I don't think we were ready for each other.
Seattle's tricky.
I think it was one of those things where we were like switching critiques, and it was one of those things where I gave a critique and they did not take it well. So I'm assuming like they don't get a lot of critiques. Sometimes it's better to kind of like, I'm not trying to say start at your level, but if you're new at writing, maybe having some people a little bit more seasoned, but still like able to give you feedback. I don't know. But for me, like Twitter is kind of like been my jam. Twitter and Goodreads. I'm on YouTube, but BookTube has a lot of drama, so I don't really suggest a lot of authors focus maybe so much on YouTube, or even sometimes even Facebook, just because I forget Facebook's even there. A lot of people in my generation are just like, Facebook? Psst, grandma and grandpa are on there, like we don't
also Facebook. I mean, yeah, that's true too.
They're changing their algorithms to do something really weird, so it's getting harder and harder to find groups, connect with people, share things. Like I shared a writing link with somebody the other day from like the WriteHive, and it was flagged by Facebook as being inappropriate and like pitched out like, thank you, now that person won't know.
Well, to be fair, they did have like some wacko thing happen with their algorithm recently where they were just flagging literally everything.
They flagged my post about chicken sausage. I mean, come on.
I need to be good. Anyway, moving on.
But I think Goodreads is especially important. I think it's especially important because a lot of readers have the Goodreads app. They're always updating it. I probably review more on Goodreads than I review on my blog, which is like, yeah.
We like Goodreads because Amazon keeps knocking out and flagging all these reviews. And I mean, if you look at Goodreads versus Amazon, Goodreads has way more reviews than Amazon does.
Amazon changed the thing to where like you can still sometimes post like ARC reviews, but you can't really post reviews unless you bought that book for a lot of other books, and that's kind of the problem. So some places are getting around that by making early somethings available to people so that they can then go and buy it. But I don't know how they do that, so I can't tell anyone. But I think like Twitter is really useful in terms of networking and socializing and getting into like the different writing events and the different writing people that are out there and connecting with people if you don't have access to that at home. Goodreads is really good platform for your book. Unfortunately, you can't post free ARCs on there anymore. You have to pay to put like giveaways on there of your book. But it's still a service that's there and available if you want to do that. And I participate in like a lot of those. So it's a good way to increase exposure of your stories, to make lists of your books, things like that. There are also forums on Goodreads. A lot of people don't know that there are author forums on Goodreads and reader forums on Goodreads where you can leave a link to your book and ask people if they would like to review it. And so it's really good. In terms of like, I just want to say real quick on the business side of it, if you are preparing to publish your story and you need a place to access readers for, early reviews of your story, Book Sirens is one that I'm through as a book blogger, and they're actually pretty good. I don't think I've ever seen an ugly cover on there ever, but most of their stories, it's really visual for me. Most of their stories, like the different formats are there. Everything seems really cool. Most of the people I've seen posting there seem to have their stuff together. But it has a really good directory of bloggers and what they read, and you can actually access data on that blogger's reading habits. I can see my own reading habits on there, but it actually tells you what percentage on Goodreads am I for reading your genre. And apparently I'm like the top 50% for love triangles, which I take offense to. But like it'll tell you that like I tend to review you more nicely before your debut. It just tells you all sorts of things. And so that helps you to gauge whether or not, if you're in like, it's almost time to release your book, whether I'm a good reviewer for you. Another place is NetGalley. It's a bit of money to post there, but it does get your book in front of readers. It does allow it to be reviewed there and across other platforms because readers can link it up to all of their stuff. And then there are also different tour places that will do blog tours for you. I go through Espresso tours. They're like my favorite because I always get books from them and participate in events. And they always have like 50 other bloggers who were participating in your event for your story. So it really expands the reach. If each of us has about 4,000, I think a lot of them we've had like a couple thousand followers. I mean, that's getting your book in front of like thousands of people, like just a lot of people. So it's really valuable thing to really know that's there, for the business side, for preparing for your release. Sorry.
And Espresso Tours actually is not one of the ones that will break your bank either. No,
they're really affordable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that. So those are my suggestions. Sorry.
A lot of good information. So for selling the books, aside from getting out there and self-marketing and pushing the technology, are there any other types of technology as a business owner that writers should be familiar with?
I found so sometimes when you do your conventions, you're set up at, you have a table at a place and you're selling your books. And so you've bought your books, you've gotten your books from your publisher and you're individually selling them yourself. Square and PayPal have apps that actually they give you like the card reader so that you can, and they also, I think if you take cash, they also process invoices for people so they can get a receipt. It's super, I'm having some trouble with one QuickBooks Self-Employed, which is supposed to track your receipts, is a really cool one too. I'm still kind of getting that one. There's a bit of a learning curve, whereas Square and PayPal are pretty straightforward. But they ship you the little card reader and you just slide the card and processes sales tax for you and everything, and you kind of go about, it's easy to sell books that way. You can take whatever, and that's a huge thing because, you will lose sales if you don't take, certain types of payment, and this way you don't have that issue. So that's great. Those are the ones that I think, as far as being, on site and selling, is super helpful.
As far as the selling your own books, I'm going to kind of take a step beyond the technology and talk about like ways to sort of boost marketing. I've worked with a marketing company for 10, 12 years. I don't know. It's been a really long time, and they're fantastic. It's a small local firm, but their clients are huge. I'm talking like large, huge. Anyway, so first of all, know where your market is. So when we're looking at kind of going back to social media, if all of your readers are on Tumblr, but you're playing around on Twitter, make a Tumblr account. Start engaging with those people, because that's where that's where you're going to start making some sales. So kind of know like where your market is in the world, but also know where they are online. When you are creating stuff for marketing and your web presence and getting out there, images matter. They matter a lot. Ari was talking about how some book covers they aren't there. They're just, the author isn't going to sell the book because the book cover, and it's not a matter of this is just not my taste. It's more that somebody doodled with crayon across the front of your book, you know, and you just want to say, no, that's not going to sell your Highland romance. I'm telling you, you know, so.
You need some sexy Momoa on that cover. Just saying.
But you know what? To Miss
Chest.
KJ's point, true
Chest.
story here, okay? True story. When I was working with our cover artist for Order of the Key, the first book cover I got back, because they're just sort of branching out into young adult and they don't have as many young adult books, it was a cozy mystery novel. I mean, I looked at it and I was like, that looks like an adult mystery, and I'm writing young adult fantasy, and especially in young adult fantasy, it needs to be flashy or it's not going to get that kind of traction. And I mean, he was great. I told him that and he was like, okay, back to the drawing board, and came out with my cover, which I think is gorgeous. But so he totally like took what I said and I was like, this isn't a YA cover, I'm sorry, and ran with it and made it happen. So there's no judgment there, but that book would not have sold in the young adult genre at all if it had that cover. And so it's what KJ is saying is huge, because it could make the difference between whether your book sells in your genre or not. You need to know what is selling in your genre, and you need to be willing to, you know, talk and advocate for it, and, you know, make sure that you have the best product for your market.
Or whether the book sells at all. You know, there are bloggers out there that have top 10 worst lists, top 50 worst lists. And they're heartbreaking to look at, you know, because it's a negative thing. You want to be optimistic. You want to love your cover, but there are a lot of authors that sort of try to Photoshop one together, and they use a font that's been used by, I mean, it's so familiar. It's like using Times New Roman on your cover. You don't want to do that. Or Comic Sans on your cover. You don't want to do that. You know, there are certain fonts you don't use. With images, they have to be sharp, and they have to blend together. They've got to have some depth, and they have to really say, this is where I am. This is where I belong. If somebody put just a broad chest on a science fiction novel, I'd be like, what are you doing?
No. And I've seen that. I have seen
no Jason
that.
Momoa on them.
I have seen that, and it drives me bonkers. I'm not gonna, I mean, I think that, like, when I say, like, I hate ugly covers, what I mean by that is I hate covers that don't, when as a reader, I want to not just read a blurb and be caught by it. Like, I want your cover to scream at me from the shelves. Like, I'm very visual. I'm seeing cover. Sometimes I'm just drawn to a cover by the font, by the colors, by the image that's on it. It doesn't even have to be like a perfect image. I've seen some really gorgeous abstract ones. I've seen some really gorgeous simple ones. I mean, poetry, for example, a lot of the covers right now are black with some sort of white image on it. Like, that's the current trend. But that's weird. That or flowers. Thank you, Rupi Kaur. Like, flowers are everything now because of her. And it's like, if you're not getting bees or flowers, you're getting black with something white on it. And so, like, when I see a cover that's just, it calls out to me. It says, take me home, look at me, you know? And that's what actually leads me to turn it over and read about what the book is about. Most of the books are going to be sideways, unfortunately, but even your spine matters. Like, you got to have a good spine. And so that's what I mean, like, by the covers. It's really important, like, to have a good cover that it is the first impression we have of your book. It has to tell me, the reader, something about your story that makes me stop in a whole sea of other covers and want to pick yours up. And it's really hard to do. So I commend people who try, but it's there's so much that goes into it. I think I read somewhere there's like a lot of psychology behind why we buy certain things, and like that's
design trends. There's colors, there's fonts, there's the placement of things. Some of the more exotic book covers are like, you know, that come out of Tor and Da. They'll put a series together, and then, like, there was one book where, like, you hold the pages and there's an image that's on the pages that you can see as you start to curl them over.
It's like art. It's freaking art. That's what it is.
You know, it's not just the cover. When you're marketing for you and your cover and your book and your series, think about what your reader is doing and their lifestyle and how you can place your book into their life and sort of tell the story of that. A romantic rom-com, kind of a beach read that's maybe 50,000 words. It's just supposed to be fun and cute. Don't release it in the middle of winter with rain coming down and some dark background. You know, really think about what's going on in the book. What season is it? What is my character's or my reader's life right now? And how can I make them see that this book belongs there? You know, so you've got to tell a story with how you're presenting yourself, your brand, your logo, your stories, everything you do to market who you are and what you're selling.
Especially if you're writing YA, because we don't have time for anything. So cover.
Also, YA is so inundated. It's so inundated.
Dragons, man.
Some dragons, some really cool elven chick, a flaming sword, some bold, gold, shiny letters. Too much.
Too much. Just kidding.
See, some of my favorite covers last year were pretty much, they were all the black, gold, and silver ones. They were so bold and beautiful, and some of them had the snake. But snakes
there was
have been
YA snake
Snakes
that
have
was
been
everywhere.
in. There's a cover designer I like who has a pre-made cover. It's gorgeous, and I wish I had a book and I could just like buy that for her. But it's like all these purple snakes, like it's like a snake pit. And like, I don't know, there's something about that cover that like I would have read whatever that book is, because it just tells me there's going to be something dangerous and exciting in the cover. And like, that's what you want to evoke in your readers. You know? KJ, what about labels? Like, how can we talk about labeling your books for a second?
Okay, what kind of
marketing? Marketing labels.
Okay, I'm assuming that you mean like kind of what's inside there, maybe like a content warning?
Just understanding like where your book belongs, but content warnings are important too.
Okay. I actually talk about that in another panel. It's called Not Safe for Work. So we're going to get really deep in that panel about, you know.
Let's not do it then.
Okay. So I'll sort of leave that for the time.
Go watch that panel.
But for labeling your book, you know, it's tricky because there's, you know, with a lot of younger writers, I see, oh, well, my book is sort of like this Harry Potter meets Lord of the Rings meets, you know, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and it kind of crosses all these boundaries, and you're like, okay, but where does it fit?
I don't think it's all of those things. Yeah,
no, it's not. It's, you know, but I think sometimes we sort of, when we're first starting out, we have this vision of we want to be Harry Potter inside Lord of the Rings, you know, kind of riding through Rohan, and then a spaceship flying overhead, and then we realize, oh, okay, that's not where it fits. So where does it fit? It gets tricky, you know, especially with fantasy. A lot of people put fantasy labels on stuff, and this is something I've been frustrated with lately. Is I've been picking up a lot of books to read that are fantasy, but they're not fantasy. They're contemporary, and they have one little fantastical element. And I'm like, that's not fantasy. Like, where's the aliens? Where's the secondary world? Where's the carnivorous trees? You know, I want something that really jumps out and says, this is a fantasy novel. This is an escapism. I think you have to look at what are the common tropes in your story. If you've got a love triangle going on, is it between adults consenting? Is it two lovers from a past life and a villain, which isn't really a triangle? You know, am I on the right track, or am I totally off base with what you were asking?
I think you're on the right track.
Okay.
Like what you're saying is like look into the tropes and make sure your tropes fit the genre that you're saying you are. And
yeah, because my follow-up question was just going to be like, what do you suggest? Like when people are looking at the business side of their writing, the labels do matter. Like how they're going to market it will depend on who their audience is, which will go with the labels. So how, if someone is completely clueless or they feel compelled to put half a dozen ones on there, like how, like from a marketing standpoint, what's something they can do, like a tool they can use or a resource or something they can do to kind of figure out where it belongs? But you were on the right track of already answering that. So psychic.
You know, like there are a lot of readers that love billionaire romances. absolutely love them. But if you list them under fantasy, just because there's, you know, a magical talking snake in there, it's not a fantasy, and that's not where your readers are. It's a billionaire romance, and it's a very select group of readers, and they want to, when they open that book, they know they're going to get a couple of things. There's going to be a brooding hero that has so much money he can vomit it out his ass, you know. There's going to be a heroine that's probably, sorry, I probably shouldn't have said that. You know, there's going to be a heroine that is sort of, she's the one that's going to be saved. Even if she's saving him emotionally, she's going to be saved financially in some way, you know. And the way that the writing is going to be styled is it's going to be very minimalistic. Billionaire romances have minimalistic writing, and I mean that as in they don't write the big, dark, deep worlds the way science fiction and fantasy writers do. It's, everything is very modern. Everything is very much about how this love story unfolds. So when you are thinking about those tropes and sort of how deep the writing is as far as like the worlds and characterization, it helps you sort of refine, okay, what's the umbrella genre that I want to put on here? What are some of the subgenres that sort of align with that? And then from there, you can form keywords that will help you with Amazon, help you with Ingram Spark, and sort of help you narrow down areas that might show up in searches, you know. And then once you sort of establish that, then you can go out to book bloggers and go, okay, I have a science fiction that's more contemporary, but it focuses on viruses. So how do I find those reviewers? I don't want to go to a book reviewer site and look for somebody who's really into spaceships because I don't have spaceships. You know, I want to look for medical stuff, medical sci-fi, basically. So I hope that kind of helps a little.
That does.
Yeah,
That does.
it's about narrowing it down and knowing where your target is. And once you know that, then you know where to look for them online. You know where to find your readers and what social media you need. It's like that is a really important thing, is knowing what you write and what you're writing each time you work on a book, because it's not always going to be exactly the same. But growing yourself as a marketer along with what you're reading, what you're writing, as you know, if you switch gears, or if you're, you know, one time you're writing, like I have, what I'm out with right now is hardcore urban fantasy, and what's coming out next is kind of like you were saying, or my next book that I'm marketing is kind of like what you were saying, is contemporary romance, but it's got like a little thread of fantasy in it, but it's not like a full-blown fantasy. So it's, you know, like, that's going to change who I go to when I'm trying to find book bloggers, when I'm trying, like, so all of those labels are essential to kind of knowing your direction marketing wise.
Another label that I would really recommend, and this is just me and what I've sort of seen discussed around the internet, is if you do have a romance in your story, state what the romance is. If it's a poly romance, write that it's a poly. If it's female-female, if it's male-male, if it's male-female. And there's no wrong answer. It's just, I think there's a lot of diverse readers that are looking for female-female romances, and they don't know where to find them because nobody labels them. You know, if your characters are named Charlie and Kim, Charlie could be a girl or a boy. You know, so kind of let your readers know, hey, I'm here. I have a male-male romance, or a female-female romance, or a poly one that's sweet but not erotic. You know, it's letting people know sort of what's in the book, where it should fit. And a really good exercise is to start with the umbrella genre and narrow it down as far as you can to the most minuscule subgenre. You know, I'm writing one right now. This is Sword and Planet fantasy. Nobody knows what Sword and Planet is except for like a very select group of science fiction writers. So.
When you were describing it, my first thought was, is science fantasy?
Yes, it is.
And then, because I mean, I read a lot of science fiction on the side, so like I'm really big about the specific genres. I'm always railing against people with like it's not cyberpunk if it's not high-tech low life, man. But I think from like a book blogger standpoint, that's actually something I see. I'd say 90% of people who are like on their own completely, like not traditionally published do struggle with is labeling the book correctly. And I can understand, I mean, there's so many labels to put on there, and it can be difficult, you know, like we do science fiction at Bookish Valhalla, but we don't do like mutant sci-fi, you know, like superpowers sci-fi, which is weird because we get a lot of those, but we don't actually read them. We read military, you know, we read cyberpunk and biopunk, which are almost kind of like, there's so much crossover at this point, but there are differences in the technology, and there's like a difference between that and like a futurist. It's just there's also near future, far future, and they fall under like different little hats, so it can be so confusing, you know, when an author's trying to figure out where their book belongs, especially if it overlaps. So just so I can understand, so what you're saying essentially is to boil it down as much as you can to what the main genre is and kind of work down that way.
Yeah, and you don't have to just list it as Sword and Planet, but if you have a Sword and Planet book, which is a very, very select subgenre, then you go, okay, I know where I am. So this is a place where I've got swordsmen and I've got spaceships. I can use both. So I can list it as fantasy, science fiction, and science fantasy, but I can also list it as, you know, add that Sword and Planet subgenre so somebody goes, oh, okay. And then if you want to get even more narrowed down, you can say, this is a second world fantasy or a high fantasy. And so they know, okay, this is going to be a world I don't know, no Earth, hooray. This is something I can get into. It's not going to be another contemporary with one little, you know, side errand magical thing and then completely kind of misdiagnose the book, I guess.
Yeah, that's good advice. Thank you.
Anyway, sorry.
Diana, sorry.
No, it was perfectly fine. I had to send some children to be disciplined by daddy. So,
oh gosh.
Life of a mom. I was just looking at the time, and well, to wrap it up, since we've talked so much about authors and making themselves much more tech savvy, what would you recommend for folks who struggle with technology?
I think, I'll say something.
Go ahead, Ari.
You know, I've worked in so many places with people who aren't used to technology that I think the important thing is to find someone who's patient with you to help you. You need, like, having a foundational understanding of how to work something is important, but if you have the wrong person helping you, it can be a very stressful experience. So find someone who not just knows what they're doing, but someone who can explain it to you in your language. One thing that's really helpful is YouTube tutorials, because you have visual walkthroughs. You can also do Google searches and they will have like visual walkthroughs as well. And some of them are really, really simple. It's just step by step. And that's a really good introduction. And just start with learning one tool at a time. Don't do like a million, because I try that and it hurts. Try one at a time and just go from there. Every single one of us at one point was in your shoes, you know, like there was a time I didn't know how to use Scrivener or Ulysses or Google Docs or email. I mean, I remember learning email. It's sometimes still like an anomaly to me. But it's something we all have to learn. So you're not alone. But just find kind of a wingman to walk you through if you get stuck and you don't understand. And it's okay. Just take your time.
And don't be afraid of Googling, like, how do I format this? Or what button do I press to bold things? Like, I mean, it seems like it might be a basic thing to search and you might feel a little silly. But the truth is there are other people like you who don't know exactly how to do these things, and there are step-by-step walkthroughs. There are people just saying, oh, in Office, if you Google it, you'll see, oh, in order to do this. I mean, I'll be honest, there have been times at my job where I've had to do that, and that's my daily job that I get paid for, where I'm like, oh, a mail merge. I've never done one of these before. How do I do that? And I've had to Google to walk me through it, because you know, it's just not one of the functions I've used on Microsoft Word, even though I know Microsoft Word like the back of my hand. I just don't do it. So and there are things that I just haven't done in a long time that I'll have to do that with, where it's just, okay, it's been a really long time since I've worked through this program. How do I use this again? There are guides out there, as long as you do know how to work Google, you know, that can guide you and give you step-by-step instructions on how to do these things. And also, like Ari was saying, take it slow. It's okay. You know, find someone who can help, ask questions. I mean, on social media, I know that sometimes it's a minefield, but there are a lot of people who are 100% willing to go. I mean, you might get some jerks too, but there are people who, if you go, I've never had to do this, how do I do this? There are people who are your, you know, tweeps, I always call them, Twitter people, who will go, oh, I just did that yesterday. Here's how you do it. Or I'll DM you with instructions. And, you know, having, like, not being afraid to ask and knowing when something is, you know, which I think is KJ talks about a lot.
KJ helped me before.
Yeah.
Didn't you help me recently, KJ, with making like those anchor? It did work, by the way. I wasn't ignoring you. I just have been avoiding my blog. But it did, you know, I didn't know how to do it, and I Googled, and they were like, oh, you need a plugin. And I'm like, I'm sure you could do this without a plugin. And I'm not as well versed in like HTML or CSS, you know, or anything like that as KJ is. So she was very helpful. So just, you know, being able to ask is, you know, really important if you can't find the information yourself, because the alternative is just not knowing ever. It's just rip off the Band-Aid and ask someone, please. Sorry, go.
Is it moves so fast. You know, the first time I started working with code, I was coding in Basic A, which, you know, that means I was around when the dinosaurs were around. So, you know, and then I was coding in DOS, and then I was coding HTML and CSS. And then, you know, all of a sudden, like, then I had babies and the technology moves so fast. I'm like, what am I doing again? So what I find with my clients and with the authors that I, you know and talk to is when they're frustrated or they don't know what to do. I mean, it is frustration because it's not something that's familiar. And sometimes even research just doesn't wield anything at all. You know, and so reach out. If you can't reach out, or, you know, you haven't found the right person to really help, that's fine. Make yourself a list. All the technology that you're going to need to know, write down a list of all the things that you do know how to do. I know how to email, I know how to write a Word doc, I know how to work in Scrivener. And then write down a list of the things that you don't really know how to do. You know, I don't know how to create a book cover unless it's in Paint and it's terrible. I don't know how to format the inside of my book. I don't know how to purchase a Facebook marketing ad, or if it's even useful.
I don't know how to code a website.
There's going to be things you don't know how to do, and that's fine. Nobody's going to know everything. So look at that list and think, okay, can I learn one of these? You know, what's the small one? What's the easy one to start? Or what's the one I feel most comfortable with? And then you have to really step back and go, okay, I'm about to launch this book. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Do I need a professional to step in? What pieces can I do, and where do I need to call somebody else to do the heavy lifting for me? Because it's going to save you, it might cost you a little bit of money, but it'll save you a lot of tears. So I've had author friends that will spend hours and hours and hours just crying, trying to put a picture together in Canva because it's not working correctly, you know, or it's not doing what they wanted to do. And I'm like, honey, just ask me a question. You know, we could have had this done 2 hours ago. Saved you a lifetime. So definitely reach out. And then when you do need to call a pro, talk to someone, talk to a professional, get recommendations. You know, as much as I want to say, hire me, you know, there are people that are dedicated and specialized with other people that will be a better fit. So ask for recommendations from your peers on professionals that they've personally worked with, or people that they're like, oh, this person looks interesting, because you just might find the person that's going to be the most helpful to you. So.
All right.
Yeah.
Sorry, taking the room again.
Yeah.
It's all good information. I don't think we should apologize for that. Are there any final comments or thoughts before we
I don't think
say
so.
goodbye?
No, I think just get started when you can, start small and build until you're ready to start releasing those books.
Yep. And good luck.
And good luck.
Yes.
Jump in. Don't test the waters, just jump in. It's better that way.
Yes.
Sometimes you just learn by doing.
Definitely.
Well,
Right.
I will wrap this up and go ahead and end it. And been spending about 15 years trying to finish a book while I've been teaching. So
Now you know where to find all of us.
Yeah.
Perseverance.
Yes.
it's like, all right, I went the teaching route and still waiting to grow up to be an author. So
You can do it.
You're already a writer, so
Yeah,
hey, yeah, I write my lesson plans. So
that's right. You're 90% of the way there.
right. Well, it was good to meet all of you, and maybe I'll
Yes.
find you somewhere or reconnect in some other way. We'll see what the universe has in store.
We're all on Twitter.
yes.
I'm pretty sure we're all on Goodreads. Justine is definitely on Goodreads now.
I am. I even have
We're
an
all on
author
Pinterest.
account now.
That's a good idea. Where do you find each of us?
Yes,
Where did-
actually.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
JustineManzano.com is my website. I am also Justine_Manzano on Twitter and Instagram. I have an author page on Facebook. You should just be able to search me because my name is not extremely popular as a name. So, and Pinterest, where all my writing related craziness is, also probably an easy search. And I'm Geektastic Justine on Tumblr, but that's really just my Geektastic dumps of stuff that I love and not so much my writing, but but you're welcome to join me there anyway. KJ?
You can find me at kjherowick.com or pretty much any social media at kjherowick. If there's one you want to connect with me on, but I'm not there, just reach out on Twitter. My DMs are always open. Ari?
You can find me at my blog, Bookish Valhalla. My email's there. It just goes to me. No matter who you address, it just goes to me. And then I'm also on YouTube. My channel is Lost in Lore. I don't really post a lot, but when I do, I am not apologetic. So brace yourself. And then Twitter, but I'm not under my name. I'm under Souffle Lumiere. It's just a mouthful. So it's SOUFFLELUMIERE. So those are the main places you can find me. I almost never go anywhere else. So yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all, and we'll again look for you on social media and be in touch.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.